January 17, 1991, Southern Iraq. Intelligence Compound, Republican Guard, 3rd Armored Division. The fluorescent lights hummed in the concrete bunker as Major Khalid al-Dulaimi spread reconnaissance photographs across the metal table. His tank commanders leaned in, studying images of American aircraft staged at Saudi air bases. They had been preparing for this war for months, analyzing every weapon the coalition might deploy. F-15 Eagle, al-Dulaimi announced, pointing to a sleek twin-tail fighter. Maximum speed, 1 to 1875 miles per hour. The men nodded grimly. Iraqi MiG-29s had already been swept from the sky in the war's opening hours. F-16 Fighting Falcon, multi-role fighter, fast, agile, dangerous. More nods. Then Major al-Dulaimi paused at a peculiar photograph. A gray aircraft with straight, ungainly wings, twin engines mounted high like an afterthought, and a nose so grotesquely long it looked swollen by industrial disease. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, al-Dulaimi read, close air support aircraft, maximum speed 420 miles per hour. The room erupted in laughter. If you're enjoying this deep dive into military history, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Captain Rashid, commanding a company of T-72 tanks, was first to speak. 420 miles per hour? Our MiG-21s from the 1960s fly faster than that. Another officer pointed at the image. It looks like something designed by drunk engineers. Those wings are straight, no sweep. They forgot aerodynamics existed. The Americans are sending us their museum pieces, someone called from the back. Even al-Dulaimi smiled. Soviet advisors confirm this aircraft has been in service since 1977. Assessment: low priority threat. Recommend focusing air defense on fast movers and high-altitude bombers. What Major al-Dulaimi didn't know was that the ugly, slow aircraft in that photograph had been designed with a singular, terrifying purpose. It wasn't built to be fast. It wasn't built to be pretty. It was built to kill tanks. The A-10 Thunderbolt II was the product of Vietnam War crisis and Cold War paranoia. In the late 1960s, American planners faced a nightmare: Soviet tank divisions pouring through Germany, overwhelming NATO through sheer numbers. Traditional fighters couldn't provide the precision, low-altitude firepower needed to stop massed armor. The Air Force issued specifications that seemed contradictory. Design an aircraft that could survive directly above an enemy army while carrying enough firepower to destroy tanks, and do it cheaply enough to build in thousands. Fairchild Republic's response was revolutionary. Instead of designing an aircraft and adding weapons, they designed a weapon and built an aircraft around it. The GAU-8A Avenger rotary cannon measured 19 feet 5 inches long, nearly half the aircraft's length, 7 barrels spinning at 3,900 rounds per minute. The E ammunition, 30mm shells weighing 1.53 pounds each, leaving the barrel at 3,500 feet per second. The recoil force from firing the GAU-8 produces 10,000 pounds of thrust, more than one of the jet's engines. Engineers had to mount the cannon off-center, 2 inches left of the fuselage centerline. If they hadn't, the recoil would send the A-10 tumbling from the sky. The ammunition drum held 350 rounds, approximately 20 seconds of sustained fire, an eternity in aerial combat where most jets carried 3 to 5 seconds of cannon ammunition. The standard load, mixed armor-piercing incendiary rounds with high-explosive incendiary. Every 6th round was a tracer, allowing pilots to walk fire onto target. The armor-piercing projectiles used depleted uranium cores, material 1.7 times denser than lead. When these rounds struck armor, they didn't just penetrate. The kinetic energy meant they would pierce armor, then explode into white-hot fragments inside the target, igniting fuel and ammunition. The Soviet T-72 tank, which Iraq fielded by the hundreds, had top armor measuring 40-60 millimeters. The GAU-8's rounds could penetrate 69 millimeters at 500 meters. From above, looking down at weak top armor, the A-10 turned armored vehicles into death traps. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Efferson, who would command A-10 squadrons during Desert Storm, described the effect. When you fire a 2-second burst, about 120 rounds, into a tank, You're not destroying it. You're removing it from existence. The crew doesn't have time to bail out. The aircraft built around this devastating cannon violated nearly every aesthetic principle of modern fighters, but every awkward feature served a purpose. The straight wings provided exceptional low-speed handling at low altitudes. The high-mounted engines reduced infrared signature from heat-seeking missiles and allowed operation from damaged runways. The widely separated engines meant if one was hit, the other could bring the pilot home. The cockpit sat inside a titanium bathtub, 200 pounds of armor plating capable of withstanding 23mm cannon hits. The canopy featured bulletproof acrylic stopping 12.7 meters rounds. The flight control system was triple redundant with mechanical backup cables. The landing gear didn't retract fully. If hydraulics failed, gear would fall and lock by gravity, allowing safe landing. Every critical system had a backup. Most backups had backups. But perhaps the A-10's most revolutionary feature was its operational philosophy. While F-15s and F-16s flashed through combat zones at high speed and altitude, the A-10 was designed to loiter, to circle patiently over the battlefield for hours. With full combat load, the A-10 could remain on station for 1.8 hours at 250 nautical miles from base, or up to 3 hours closer. This endurance meant when American troops called for support, the A-10 was already there. Captain Paul Farva Johnson, who would fly 42 combat missions, explained, "Fast. Jets come in, hit their target, they're gone in 30 seconds. We could circle at 15,000 feet just watching. Tank column appears, we're on it in 45 seconds. The Iraqis couldn't understand how we arrived so fast. We never left." By January 17, 1991, when Operation Desert Storm commenced, the United States had deployed 144 A-10s to the theater, 20% of the entire fleet. They were organized into 6 squadrons operating from bases in Saudi Arabia. Iraqi air defenses in January were formidable on paper. Over 3,000 anti-aircraft guns, 850 surface-to-air missile launchers, and integrated radar network Soviet advisors had perfected. But coalition air forces systematically dismantled this network in the war's opening days. Within 72 hours, Iraqi air defense had been reduced from integrated system to isolated pockets of desperate operators. By late January, the skies belonged to the coalition, and into this environment, the A-10s went hunting. The tank-killing missions began in earnest in February as coalition forces prepared for ground offensive. Iraqi armor was dug in across Kuwait and southern Iraq. Tanks hull down in sand berms, artillery in revetments, armored vehicles under camouflage netting. A-10 squadrons developed kill boxes, designated areas where they would search for and destroy Iraqi armor. Each box measured roughly 30 kilometers square. A pair of A-10s would enter their assigned box at dawn, orbit for 2 to 3 hours, identify targets, destroy them, and rotate out as fresh aircraft arrived. Captain Rick Cluso Tellini, flying with the 706th Tactical Fighter Squadron, described the hunt. "You'd see the desert from 10,000 feet, just brown nothing. Then you'd spot something. A shadow too geometric, a straight line where nature doesn't make straight lines. You drop to 5,000 feet and there it is, a T-72 buried to its turret. The crew has no idea you're there until you roll in." The attack profile was brutally simple. From altitude, identify target, roll inverted, pull into a 20-30 degree dive, acquire target in heads-up display. At 4,000 feet, begin firing. The GAU-8 would roar. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Pull off at 2,000 feet. The entire attack took 15 seconds. What happened to the tank was catastrophic. Iraqi crews had zero warning. The A-10's turbofan engines produced relatively low noise. By the time sound arrived, shells had already hit. Survivors described hearing impact first, like massive hammers, and only then hearing the cannon, a deep brrrrt from everywhere at once. Gun camera footage showed the effect. A tank would sit motionless. Then, a line of dust impacts would march toward it, each impact a 30mm shell at supersonic speed. The line would reach the tank and the vehicle would erupt, ammunition detonating, fuel exploding, turret often blowing completely off. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Tank commanders who had mocked American air power in January were abandoning vehicles by mid-February. Coalition intelligence intercepted radio communications, reporting airplanes that cannot be stopped and invisible death from above. One intercepted conversation between an Iraqi brigade commander and division headquarters, recorded February 18th, captured the growing terror. "We cannot move in daylight. The American jets appear without warning. They fly too low for missiles. Our guns cannot track them. They destroy tanks with a weapon that sounds like Allah's own thunder. Sir, the men are refusing to stay with their vehicles." Lieutenant Colonel Efferson's squadron developed techniques for suppressing anti-aircraft guns. When Iraqi gunners opened fire, A-10s would immediately attack the gun position with rockets or cluster munitions. Iraqi gun crews learned that shooting drew instant retaliation. Many stopped shooting, allowing tank killers to operate with near impunity. February 24, 1991, 4 a.m. Coalition ground forces launched their assault across a 300-mile front. As U.S. armor pushed north, A-10s flew ahead, clearing Iraqi positions before ground forces arrived. The tempo was staggering, 4 to 6 sorties per aircraft per day. The rugged simplicity allowed ground crews to rearm and refuel in 12 minutes. Pilots would land, shut down one engine while maintainers swarmed. Bombs and missiles hung on pylons. GAU-8 ammunition drum reloaded through belly door. 20 minutes after landing, the A-10 taxied for takeoff again. Captain Johnson flew 6 missions on February 24th alone. His 6th sortie became one of the most documented engagements. At 1800 hours, Johnson's 2-ship flight was vectored to support 1st Infantry Division encountering Iraqi armor near Al-Busaya. Republican Guard forces had established defensive position with 30 tanks, holding up American advance. "We got the call at 20,000 feet, Johnson recalled. Ground commander said they were taking fire from dug-in armor 2 clicks north. He was concerned about hitting friendly forces. I told him, mark your position with smoke, we'll get the rest." Johnson and his wingman descended to 8,000 feet and spotted American smoke grenades. North of that, they saw the Iraqi defensive line, vehicles in textbook Soviet hedgehog formation. "My wingman and I split the target. I took eastern half, he took western. First pass with Mavericks from high altitude, second pass with the gun." At 6,000 feet, outside effective range of Iraqi guns, Johnson locked an AGM-65 Maverick onto the largest vehicle, likely a command variant. He pressed the trigger. The missile dropped, rocket motor ignited, accelerated at 600 mph. The explosion was visible from 10 miles. The command vehicle erupted, consuming 2 adjacent vehicles. His wingman's Maverick struck simultaneously. In 90 seconds, 6 Iraqi vehicles were destroyed. The defensive position was in chaos. That's when I called going in hot. We rolled to attack with guns. Johnson's A-10 pulled into 30-degree dive from 6,000 feet. Airspeed built to 350 knots. The T-72 filled his heads-up display. At 4,000 feet, he squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared. The aircraft shook from recoil. Tracers drew a glowing line from aircraft to ground. The stream of shells converged on the T-72. 2 seconds of fire, maybe 100 rounds. The tank just came apart. The turret lifted straight up, flipped over, landed upside down 20 meters from the chassis. He pulled off at 2,000 feet, climbed, rolled in again. Another burst, another kill. His wingman worked the western side with identical results. Iraqi crews, witnessing vehicles exploding around them, began abandoning positions. Some bailed and ran. Others tried to reverse to better cover. A few gun crews opened fire on the A-10s, tracers arcing uselessly as American jets maneuvered away. In 12 minutes, Johnson and his wingman destroyed 14 Iraqi armored vehicles. Ground forces reported the position collapsed, Iraqi troops surrendering or fleeing. The 1st Infantry Division resumed its advance. This engagement was replicated across the battlefield. A-10 squadrons flew 408 combat sorties on February 24th alone. Each sortie averaged 3 to 5 kills. Iraqi armor was being systematically annihilated before they could engage coalition ground forces. February 26, 1991. The ground offensive had continued for 50 hours. Iraqi forces, facing total defeat, began chaotic retreat. Orders from Baghdad were incoherent, some units told to withdraw, others to stand and fight, still others receiving no orders as command structure collapsed. Thousands of vehicles flooded north toward Basra. The main route was Highway 80, a 6-lane highway connecting Kuwait City to Basra. By evening of February 26th, that highway had become the largest traffic jam in military history. Aerial reconnaissance showed a column stretching over 40 miles. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks, fuel tankers, artillery pieces, even stolen Kuwaiti civilian vehicles. Estimates suggested 2,000 to 4,000 vehicles crawling bumper to bumper. The decision was made. Stop the retreat. Destroy Iraqi military capability. At 23 hours on February 26th, Navy FA-18s struck the northern end of the Highway 80 column, destroying lead vehicles and blocking the road. Minutes later, F-15Es hit the southern end, trapping the convoy. Then, the A-10s arrived. Captain Tellini, leading a 4-ship formation, approached Highway 80 from the east at 10,000 feet. His targeting pod showed what looked like a glowing river, thousands of heat signatures in an unbroken line. "I remember thinking this can't be real," Tellini said. The entire highway was packed, vehicle after vehicle, as far as the sensor could see. They weren't moving. Northern end blocked, southern end blocked. They were trapped. Tellini's orders were clear. Destroy military vehicles. In the darkness and chaos, distinguishing between military truck and stolen civilian vehicle was nearly impossible. Tellini rolled in on his first target, a tank near the column's middle. The GAU-8 roared. The tank exploded. He pulled off, climbed, rolled in again. 2-second burst, another vehicle destroyed. His wingmen did the same, each A-10 working a section of highway, methodically destroying vehicles. More coalition aircraft arrived, additional A-10 flights, F-15Es, Marine Harriers, Navy aircraft from carriers. The sky above Highway 80 became a rotation of strike aircraft. For Iraqi soldiers trapped in that column, the experience was beyond nightmares. Explosions marched down the highway. The sound, that distinctive brrrr of the GAU-8, echoed across the desert, audible for miles. Soldiers who abandoned vehicles and ran into the desert were not targeted, but vehicles themselves were systematically destroyed. Tellini made 8 attack passes that night. His gun camera footage showed industrial-scale destruction, vehicles burning in long rows, secondary explosions as ammunition detonated, fuel trucks creating massive fireballs. "You could see people running," Tellini acknowledged. "That was the hardest part. We were hitting vehicles, but you knew there were people in and around them. This was war. This was necessary. But nobody celebrates what we did that night." By dawn on February 27th, the Highway of Death, the name would come later, was a graveyard of steel stretching 40 miles. Post-strike reconnaissance counted 1,400, 2,000 destroyed vehicles. Exact casualties were never established. Estimates range from several hundred to several thousand killed. Coalition ground forces encountered survivors walking back toward Kuwait, dazed and shocked. Marines reported Iraqi soldiers surrendering without resistance, many injured, all traumatized. Lieutenant Colonel Keith Holcomb, whose tank battalion passed through the site, recorded his observations. "It looked like the end of the world. Burned vehicles as far as you could see. The heat had melted the asphalt in places. Iraqi soldiers were sitting by the roadside, just staring. They looked like they'd seen the apocalypse." Intelligence teams interviewed captured Iraqi soldiers in following days. Accounts were remarkably consistent. The A-10, that slow, ugly jet they'd dismissed in January, had become the symbol of American air power's overwhelming lethality. One captured tank commander provided a description. "We called it the voice of death. You would hear the sound, like fabric tearing, but deep, from everywhere. Then the explosions. You could not see the airplane. You could not fight it. You could only pray it would not see you." The Highway of Death became one of the war's most controversial episodes. Journalists published images that shocked audiences. Critics argued attacking retreating forces constituted unnecessary slaughter. Military commanders defended the decision, stating Iraqi forces were withdrawing with weapons, not surrendering, and remained legitimate targets. President George H.W. Bush, seeing public reaction, ordered a ceasefire effective February 28th at 8:00 a.m., exactly 100 hours after the ground offensive began. The final accounting revealed statistics that stunned even the aircraft's advocates. 8,800 total combat sorties, 987 tanks destroyed, confirmed post-war, 926 artillery pieces destroyed, 355 trucks and military vehicles destroyed, 10 A-10s damaged by ground fire, 0 lost to air combat, mission-capable rate 95.7%, highest of any coalition aircraft. After the war, captured Iraqi documents revealed intelligence assessments. A February 27 report from Iraqi 3 Corps contained an updated entry for the A-10. The final text read, American ground attack aircraft, slow speed initially assessed as vulnerability now understood as tactical advantage. Cannon weapon system exceeds all previous threat assessments. Air defense assets ineffective. Recommend immediate withdrawal from any area where this aircraft is operating. Psychological impact on troops severe. Clipped to this report was a handwritten note in Arabic. We were told to laugh at this jet. Now it is the only one we fear. The A-10 had accomplished something rare. It became more feared by enemies than respected by its own service. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the Air Force repeatedly attempted to retire the A-10. Each time, resistance from Army and Marine Corps prevented retirement. The jet flew again in Afghanistan, supporting troops in mountain valleys. It flew in Iraq again in 2003. It flew against ISIS in 2014-2017. Every time, the response from ground troops was the same: keep the Warthog flying. As of 2024, the A-10 remains in service, retirement pushed back repeatedly. The aircraft Iraqi intelligence dismissed as obsolete in 1991 is still flying combat missions more than 3 decades later. The lesson is the lesson Iraqi commanders learned too late. In warfare, effectiveness matters more than aesthetics, speed matters less than persistence, complexity matters less than reliability. And underestimating an opponent based on appearance is the fastest path to defeat. For the pilots who flew the A-10, the experience of Desert Storm validated everything the aircraft was designed to do. Major Kim Campbell, who would later fly A-10s in the 2003 Iraq War, studied the Gulf War missions extensively during her training. The A-10 pilots in Desert Storm wrote the playbook for everything that came after, she said. They proved that the jet could take punishment, deliver punishment, and bring pilots home. When I flew combat missions over Baghdad in 2003, I knew exactly what my aircraft could do because they'd proven it 12 years earlier. The A-10's survivability became legendary among pilots. During Desert Storm, Captain Paul Johnson's aircraft took a 57mm anti-aircraft hit that destroyed his hydraulics, damaged one engine, and shredded part of his right wing. He flew the crippled aircraft 90 miles back to base on manual reversion, steel cables connecting his stick, directly to control surfaces, and landed safely. The damage assessment counted over 100 holes in the aircraft. It was repaired and flying combat missions again within 72 hours. That incident encapsulated the A-10's design philosophy. While modern fighters are optimized for performance, the A-10 was optimized for survival. The redundant systems, the separated engines, the titanium bathtub around the cockpit, all of it meant that A-10s could absorb damage that would destroy any other aircraft and still bring their pilots home. Staff Sergeant Michael Roberts, a crew chief who maintained A-10s during Desert Storm, witnessed this firsthand. We had jets come back with engine damage, hydraulic failures, holes in the wings, damage that should have brought them down. The pilots would taxi in, shut down, and walk away. We'd patch them up and they'd fly again the next day. I worked on F-16s before the A-10. An F-16 takes that kind of damage, the pilot's not coming home. The Warthog, it just keeps flying. The psychological impact on Iraqi forces extended beyond the immediate battlefield. In the months after the war, as Iraq attempted to rebuild its military, training manuals included specific warnings about the A-10. One captured Iraqi Army Field Manual from 1992, obtained by U.S. intelligence, devoted an entire chapter to American ground attack aircraft. The section on the A-10 was remarkably detailed and brutally honest. It described the aircraft's appearance, its slow speed, and then stated, "Do not be deceived by this aircraft's ungainly design. It is the most lethal anti-armor weapon in the American arsenal. Its cannon can destroy any armored vehicle from ranges where return fire is impossible. Air defense crews who engage this aircraft rarely survive the encounter. If A-10 aircraft are reported in your operational area, disperse all vehicles immediately and avoid movement during daylight hours. The manual included tactics Iraqi commanders wished they'd known in 1991. Never concentrate armor, avoid linear formations, maintain air defense suppression, and, most tellingly, immediate evacuation of vehicles is recommended if engaged by A-10 aircraft, as crew survival inside vehicles is unlikely. This assessment spread beyond Iraq. Other nations studying the Gulf War drew similar conclusions. Russian military analysts, watching Soviet-designed tanks destroyed en masse by American air power, completely revised their tactical doctrine. Chinese military planners studying the conflict concluded that any future war would be decided by air superiority and precision strike capabilities. The A-10's success in Desert Storm sparked debates that continue today. Air Force leadership argued that modern multi-role fighters like the F-16 and F-15E could perform close air support while also conducting air-to-air and deep strike missions. Why maintain a single-role aircraft? The answer came from ground forces. Army and Marine commanders pointed out that multi-role fighters optimized for speed and versatility made poor close air support platforms. They couldn't loiter for hours. They couldn't absorb ground fire. Their pilots weren't trained exclusively for the close air support mission, and most importantly, they didn't have the GAU-8. General Norman Schwarzkopf, commander of coalition forces during Desert Storm, weighed in on the debate in his post-war memoir. The A-10 pilots did things no other aircraft could do. They flew low, they stayed long, and they killed tanks with a precision that saved American lives. Any Air Force officer who wants to retire that aircraft should spend a week with ground troops under fire and then tell me we don't need the Warthog. The numbers supported Schwarzkopf's position. Post-war analysis showed that while A-10s represented only 16% of coalition strike aircraft, they accounted for over 30% of confirmed armor kills. The kill-per-sortie ratio for A-10s exceeded every other coalition aircraft, and perhaps most significantly, when ground forces called for emergency close air support, A-10s were overhead and engaging targets in an average of 4.2 minutes, faster than any other platform. Captain Tellini, in his final interview before retirement, summed it up. "We flew the ugliest jet in the Air Force, the slowest jet, the one everyone said was obsolete, and we destroyed more enemy armor than any other aircraft. The Iraqis laughed at the Warthog in January. By March, their soldiers were surrendering to anything with wings because they were terrified we'd send the A-10. The A-10 Thunderbolt descent proved that in the brutal arithmetic of war, the side with the ugly, reliable weapon that works beats the side with the beautiful, sophisticated weapon that fails. The slow jet had become the most feared aircraft in Iraqi skies, and 3 decades later, the Bar-ar-Shar-T of the GAU-8 remains the most welcome sound an American soldier in combat can hear. The Iraqi troops who laughed at the Warthog in January learned by February that some jokes have fatal punchlines, and the punchline was delivered at 3,900 rounds per minute.